Hello and welcome to Study Buddhism Chats. I'm here today with Dr. Alexander Berzin, the founder of Study Buddhism, and with the one and only, or I should probably say the second and only, Serkong Rinpoche. It will become clear why I've said the second and only. But first of all, Dr. Berzin, hello. Good afternoon.
Hi. Nice to be here.
And Serkong Rinpoche, thank you so much for being here. You've come all the way from
India.
And you're now on your trip to Europe. What are you? How long are you here for? What are you doing?
Oh, it's a 3-month trip. So until end of the September. Yeah. So giving teachings in the centers in Europe.
Yeah.
How many times have you been to Europe?
Oh, probably 4-5 times.
Yeah.
And where's your favorite place? I mean, you've traveled quite a lot in
that's
Europe.
Diplomatically difficult.
Oh, it's diplomatically difficult, but where do you like? I won't say favorite. Where do you like?
I like, because I like food. So Italy.
Yeah, that's a good choice. That's
Most
a safe
Tibetans like Italian food the best.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so we're here today to talk about Dr. Berzin and his experience with Serkong Rinpoche's predecessor, also Serkong Rinpoche, life with him, and his experience with both the predecessor and the current Serkong Rinpoche. So, Alex,
Yes.
could you tell us a little bit about how you met Serkong Rinpoche?
Well, this was back in the winter of 1969. And I had gone to India on the Fulbright program to write my dissertation at Harvard University. And the topic that the professor had, and I had chosen, which was an outrageously too advanced topic, was to study the Gukyu Samaja Tantra. And
So just something simple.
Just something simple. Back in those days, people had no idea of what actually anything was about. But anyway, it was a big name. And I was with Sharpa and Kamlung Rinpoches, who I had the connection with from Geshe Wangil in New Jersey. They had been there as young teenagers. And they introduced me. I went to Bodh Gaya with them, and they had suggested that I see Serkong Rinpoche to ask his advice of who I could study this with. So I went to see him. It was staying in some, he always liked to stay in very, very humble, simple places. If we went by train, he always insisted we go by third-class train and so on. Even if we had to sleep by the toilets, he was perfectly okay with that. But anyway, I went to see him, and he told me that there was this retired abbot of Gyume Lower Tantric College, and he would be, I've forgotten his name, but he said that he would be the best one to study with. But he's in 3-year retreat, but he'll be finished in late spring, so you should ask him. So that was how I met him, and actually it was perfect advice, because first I had to learn spoken language. I had only studied the written language. There was no textbooks or anything available at that time to study that. And when I went to see the abbot, he said, very good. I'm just a few days out of my last retreat, and then I'm going into a 3-year Gukyu Samaja retreat. Would you like to join me? And this was perfect, because then on my own, I realized that this was way, way too advanced for me. And rather than Serkong Rinpoche saying to me that, you're stupid, this is, ridiculous for you to want to study this, I learned it by myself. And then actually I went to Tijang Rinpoche, and Tijang Rinpoche said, well, why don't you study Lam Rim? Well, what's that? Nothing was available at that time. Nothing had been translated. And then Sharpa and Kamlung Rinpoche's teacher, Geshe Ngawan Tarke, agreed to take me as his first Western disciple. And he taught me Lam Rim. So that was how I met Serkong Rinpoche. And then after they built the library, and we Geshe Targye became the teacher there, and Sharpan Kamo Rinpoches became the translators. And His Holiness told me, I asked if I could be of help to His Holiness, and His Holiness said yes, but go back and hand in your dissertation and then come back. So I came back, and Serkong Rinpoche had been in Nepal meanwhile, and he came back to Dharamsala, and I went to see him and so on. And he seemed to have this, not seemed to, he did have this ability to know the karmic relations with others. And he seemed to recognize, in retrospect, that he seemed to recognize that I had the karmic connection with him to be able to be his translator. And later I figured out that he was preparing me as a gift, an offering to give to His Holiness to be able to translate for him. And he just said, stay here, basically like a pet dog, to sit in the corner and listen to him as he interacted with people. He would explain to me what he was telling them and so on. And I became like an apprentice to him. And I remember asking Sharpa Rinpoche at that time, who is my, root teacher, my root guru? And he said, don't be stupid, it's Serkong Rinpoche. It's very clear. So, and then basically he trained me to become his translator, to, learn everything. It was really like a medieval standard, sorcerer's apprentice type of apprenticeship. It was unbelievably wonderful. For 9 years I was with him.
So when and how did he pass away, and how did you feel?
Well, he always taught Donglen. That was one of his favorite things, giving and taking. And he said that when you do that, you should be willing to die with that. It's totally serious. And he said that even if you die like an astronaut dying in space, you become like a hero, and it will inspire everybody, and so on. So His Holiness had given the first Kala Chakra initiation in Spiti, and Serkong Rinpoche went up there, and I organized a busload of us from the library to go up there. We were the first Westerners to get permission to go up there. And after that initiation, then Rinpoche stayed on in Spiti, went back to Dharamsala. And at that time, His Holiness was flying to Geneva, and Yasser Arafat was also flying to Geneva at that time, and was going to land at the same time as His Holiness. And the authorities there said that they couldn't guarantee His Holiness's security. And Serkong Rinpoche, who had an unbelievable connection with His Holiness, seemed to know that. He always did seem to have extrasensory perception. I saw several examples of that, I should say. And he basically told, one old monk there that I'm going to take on His Holiness's obstacle. There's this big obstacle to His Holiness's life. And he went up to, was it Gibar?
Yeah,
right?
Gibor.
Very high elevation, to a place, some person there that he knew, and said, can I stay there? And the person agreed. His Holiness, brought this other old monk with him, and he basically had Ngawang, the attendant, put some special sheet on the bed, and he laid down in the Buddha sleeping position and just passed away. I had taken him for a physical examination shortly before that, a couple weeks before that, and he was in perfectly good health. And he took on that obstacle, just passed away, and His Holiness landed in Geneva. There was a lot of chaos at the airport. His motorcade got lost in Geneva and so on, but His Holiness was safe. And so Rinpoche did exactly what he always said one should be willing to do is to die doing Donglen. So that was how he passed away. And I found out about this in Dharamsala. It was very hard to believe. I went up to the Rinpoche's house, and they confirmed to me that that was what happened, and I was a bit in shock. Went down from his house, because I lived in Lower Dharamsala, stopped at the library to see Geshe Ngawang Targye, who's another my main teachers, and Geshe Targye was having lunch with somebody, and so he told me to wait, and they were, just acting perfectly normal and, laughing and having a good time, as is usually the case. And then afterwards I went in and I told him, have you heard that Serkong Rinpoche passed away? He was also one of Geshe Targye's teachers. And then he began to tell me that everybody's, guru passes away. This is part of, of life. And it was very, very sobering, very, very helpful, actually, that piece of advice that he gave me. And so after that, did a lot of Lama Choba type of thing, this type of, Guru Puja, and so on. And life went on.
You mentioned, actually, just to rewind, you did mention that Serkong Rinpoche showed a sort of extrasensory perception, and you have a few examples. Could you share an example with us?
Well, one example was he was teaching up in Tushita Retreat Center, and I was translating. We went up in a jeep, and before we got there, he said, Harry, there's a fire in the Gompa. And when we got there, sure enough, there was a fire. And so he foresaw that. The other example that I remember, I was with him in France, and at the Vajrayogini Center, and he was going to stay for a few days more. And I wanted to go up to, ask permission to go up to Paris. Somebody was driving up to Paris, where I would see a friend of mine up in Paris. And so I said to Rinpoche, is it okay if I go up to Paris on Sunday? And Rinpoche said, yes, you're going to Paris on Monday. And I said, well, no, I'm going on Sunday. And he said, oh, very good, you're going on Monday. And so I set off in the car with this guy, and the car broke down in the middle of nowhere. There was no way to get it fixed on Sunday in France. And sure enough, so we had to stay overnight. And sure enough, I went to Paris on Monday.
Ah, fantastic. Really. So Serkong Rinpoche passed away.
Yeah.
And then in the Tibetan tradition, you look for the reincarnation, the rebirth.
Right.
Were you involved in the search at all?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I
So
wasn't.
who did that then? And how did they find the
As far as I know, the story that I've heard, I don't remember who actually was in the search party, but because Rinpoche had, he was like the saint of Spiti. Rinpoche basically revived Buddhism and, set it on the path again in Spiti. It had degenerated or had fallen out, had disappeared. And so and he passed away in Spiti, and it seemed logical that, I suppose, and I imagine His Holiness must have had a dream or something like that he would be reborn again in Spiti. So the search party went there, and apparently when you were very, very young, there was a picture. Most people had a picture of the old Serkong Rinpoche in their homes, and as soon as you could as soon as you could talk, you would point to the picture and say, that's me. So this, and His Holiness always said that this was the best way for there to be a recognition of a tulku, that the boy themselves or the child themselves identifies themselves, that this is the most authentic way of finding a tulku. And so they went to the house, and apparently you recognize somebody by name. And when they suggested, going back to Dharamsala, I mean, you told me that that was the only thing that you really wanted to do was go there. And you were about 4 years old or something like that, and didn't cry, weren't, upset about leaving your parents or anything. You said that, there was somebody very important there that you wanted to meet, which obviously was His Holiness. I was away at the time when you came back to Dharamsala, but shortly after that, I went to meet you, and I think it was Ngawang said, "Do you know who this is?" And you said, "Don't be stupid. Of course I know who this is." And from the very beginning, Rinpoche was extremely affectionate with me, and we were old friends, not friends, but
I think we will show a clip
Yeah.
right around now, just to show the young Rinpoche. And
yeah, I
Alex.
mean, there was a very lovely picture that was taken at that time.
So, Rinpoche, the big question, what do you remember about your previous life? And tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Okay. Which one first? What do you want?
In order. Let's go with your previous life.
Okay. Complicated one. Maybe the one of the favorite question of the
Everybody.
for everybody. What do I remember? Oh, so now at this moment. So to be honest, it's like a blank. I couldn't remember at all. But when I was very young, as Alex described, even my parents felt that this boy is special. Because the first ever picture was taken is there is one from Spiti. My father thought my way of behavior is quite funny. So why not ask somebody to take a picture? So they have taken a picture. That picture is me in my lay cloth, and I'm very young, maybe almost 3. So I was wearing this something greeny lay cloth, and then folding my hands like this, like folded hand like this, and saying that I was going to stay underneath the tree because somebody will come to pick me up. So I did that several times, and then my parents thought that is very unique. Maybe he could be him. So they have this kind of a bit curiosity. So they took a picture of that. So like this, and then my attendants say that there is a Kunjok. Remember Kunjok? So Kunjok is one of my predecessors attendant who came from Tibet with him. So he's elderly monk when I came to Ganden the first time. So it is in 1990s. So then probably I'm maybe 7 or 8 years old. So then when I saw him in the crowd, lots of monks, and then I went near to him and said to him, Kunjo, how are you? So, and that Kunjo's personality from the beginning with my predecessor, like he can be a very difficult person, because it is not easy to be his friend, because he has his own attitude. So maybe he does not believe that much in past and future life. And then ever since I said that, so I don't know why he always comes with a banana, like a dozen of bananas as offering. And then he will stare at me and say like, you knew me. So that sometimes becomes so annoying when he said that. So slowly, the memories kind of faded away. So anyway, this is how I once remembered.
But also, Rinpoche, I remember we were in California together when you were 20 years old, and we saw a video of you teaching, and you said to me, I remember that.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't know whether I could say this is really me, but I feel so close. There's the same way I would say this is the same thing. So that when I watch the clip of my past life, it happens sometimes. Yeah.
And what kind of family did you grow up in? Tell us
Oh.
a little bit about your family.
Oh, my family is a farmer, and they grow. Not why we grow. They grow. They grow peas, green peas, and then apricots. And that during that time they don't grow apples. Now they do lots of apples there. So yeah, so they're a farmer basically.
And do you remember your first meeting with Alex? Now, when you were younger.
When I first met Alex, there was a bunch of Westerners there. That's how I remember. And then I couldn't remember very clearly, but somehow when I meet like my predecessors, very close students like Alex, Tubden Shedden, they can bring lots of difficult questions. Like I remember Alex asking, like, "Oh, Rinpoche, does he studies mathematics? I'm very bad in mathematics." So he will say like, "What is 2 + 3?" So I
That was later, not when I first met you.
No.
Not when I first met you, but
So like this example.
I was very annoying with you, I'm sure.
Yeah. But somehow, how much this kind of question really announce me, but I don't feel any kind of a small gap between these guys. So normally, this is the best excuse that you don't want to see them again. But somehow, I think this is the closeness from the past life, I guess.
Well, also in the past life, your predecessor scolded me all the time.
Yeah.
And his favorite name for me was Gugba, idiot. And I never, ever got angry with him. Never.
So this is the bond.
So you just mentioned that his favorite word for you was gukpa, which in Tibetan means idiot.
Right.
Or stupid. But so did the previous Serkong Rinpoche ever show much interest in your personal life or anything like that?
None whatsoever. Never asked me a personal question. It was just direct what we were doing, what we were dealing with, and so on. I mean, it was, a very personal, non-personal relationship.
So how has that changed now in the successor? I mean, how do you feel now? How is it now with you as the elder? And
well, I feel, actually you asked Chongla Rinpoche about my connection with the Serkong line. And what he said, which is very true, which I have felt this very, very strongly, is that I'm one of the bridges between each between the two incarnations. I don't know about before that, but in any case, I see very much, and I enjoy very much telling Rinpoche stories about his predecessor and explaining to Rinpoche how his predecessor would explain this or that, because being so close with him for, most days, for 9 years, he obviously, said a lot of things in private to me. And so I'm delighted to be able to share all of that with you. And also, if you remember, what I also did when you were young was keep a bit of a distance from you. What I didn't want was for you to get spoiled with Western ways. I had seen this with other tulkus, and you didn't need to learn Sesame Street English and so on. I really insisted that you learn Western subjects with the textbooks and the same things that the Tibetans learned it from. And so, like that, I kept a bit of a distance when you were really young. I didn't want you to get spoiled.
But so Rinpoche, you grow up and you're surrounded by, you have students from the predecessor, and they're telling you stories of previous life. Do you sometimes think, enough, that was my past life? Or do you does it ever get annoying?
When I was like super young, at that time, people try to come up with this information. Of course, I have no interest. So now, when I start to take the responsibility as who I'm known as, so then I think the best of the best offering for me is to remind who you are. So then I think this confidence builds up. So for like one of the best example is Alex, because there could be so many students of my predecessor. So they will support me in any kind, right? So, but Alex's support is one of the most powerful, because he will say, "This is your predecessor will be doing. This is not the way predecessor will be doing." So that brings so much kind of it opens my mind, and then I think I share with some of my tulku friends, Rinpoches. I said like, if you could remember your past life, go with it. If you cannot remember it, but then you have to hold your seat. So this is not political seat. So this is something to do or benefit others. So you need information, good information, which is not to gain names or make money or frames, but more choose the students who can really remind you who you were. So then it's getting a benefit without an effort. So I think that's the same case like Alex, how he really contributes.
And also I held back and didn't, push any of that information when you were really little.
But I think I can imagine that sometimes it feels like quite a lot of pressure. People are telling you are this name,
Yes.
this position.
Yes.
And there must be some points where you think, oh, I'm just a teenager.
Yeah.
What do I know?
That's true. So
how do you deal with those feelings?
Like there will be so many. I can be a little bit stubborn, for sure. Not a little bit, very stubborn. That's why I disrobe. So I feel very sorry for my attendants who really wanted to be me as a perfect monk, Serkong Rinpoche. But then I'm like, no, I want this way, my own way. So somehow I take a kind of a little bit wrong turn, I guess. But somehow I listen to my own heart. So sometimes listening to your own heart brings lots and lots of problems. Same case with me. But somehow I learned a lot from my mistakes. So to go back to how I challenge with all of these difficulties. So everybody is going through many difficulties, but I try to not to cling towards I had that, I feel I cannot do it. But I always think there is if the plan A cannot work, there will be plan B for sure. So this is how I'm surviving.
Exactly what your predecessor would say, actually.
And this is something I wanted to ask you. What kind of similarities do you see between the old and the new?
Well, there definitely are. I mean, I respect very much that you are a different person. And
be careful what you're saying.
No, I find very
How dare?
Very helpful. No, I find it very helpful for really understanding in terms of the Buddhist teachings of no self, no, self-established self with, everything totally coming, on that side. If you think in terms of beginningless lives, then it's not just the karma from the immediately past life, but there's a whole huge amount of karma, and many, many things will ripen. So it's a different combination. It really has convinced me of rebirth, beyond a doubt. But being a layperson actually fits very well with your predecessor. Your predecessor, he was the most practical person that you could imagine. And so whenever there were practical disputes, in villages or anything like that, he was the one that always could settle it, that gave the practical advice. And you were totally at ease and informal with everybody. You could put everybody at ease. This was, and you loved to laugh. People would, because you laughed with your whole body shaking, and people would come to tell you jokes just to watch you laugh. It was really funny. But in this way, you were the most personable. None of this high Rinpoche on a throne. You always, when we traveled around in Europe, you always ate with the family. You always did things with the family. You were never, the type of Rinpoche that would just sit in their room by themselves to eat and be waited on by others. And so this is very, very much in line with that. And also that I'm so happy and proud of the way that you've turned out, of such a fantastic teacher, that you are able to do both incredibly relate to people and teach very simple, basic things that everybody can understand. And yet on the other side, you can teach the most complicated things. So this is fantastic that you're able to do that. And it's very hard to explain or describe the connection with you, but it is such a different type of deep, deep connection, a feeling of connection that I have with you that I have never experienced with anybody else. That, that is just a solid, not solid from a Buddhist point of view, but just a totally stable connection. And to have the incredible position to be able to help make the transfer of experience and knowledge, at least the little bit that I was exposed to. How incredible to be able to do that. So I'm really kunjo sumas, they say. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So there are these similar, the sense of humor is there, but basically the way to relate to people is very much there. And the fact that you have taken responsibility to further the connections that you had with people in the past, this is fantastic. It's really astounding. And, as many people said about your predecessor, if you want to, I think it was Lama Zopa Rinpoche that said, if you want to see the real thing, what a real Lama is Serkong Rinpoche. And I think that is carrying over to this lifetime as well.
Thank you. Thank you for this input, or how you look at me. Thank you. Yeah.
And I like to treat you like a human being, because I know that that's important.
That's true.
That yes. Holy and all of that up on a throne, you never liked that in your past life. And I don't think most Rinpoches like that either. And so to be able to, like when I accompanied you on this trip in America. You were 20 years old, to get people to treat you like a 20-year-old boy who would like to go horseback riding and do things that boys do. I think that you undoubtedly appreciated that. And the same thing, now you travel. If you can, I know you like football, so that you watch football, these sort of things.
Like last night.
Like last night, you went to, for the final European Cup.
For the viewers, sorry, if we look a little sleepy, we had a late night.
That's true.
They went to the Brandenburg Gate. I'm an old man, so I didn't go. But to the Brandenburg Gate with 70,000 people to watch the final game. But this is important to realize that tulkus are human beings and they like to do normal things.
That's true. Yeah.
And not just sit on a throne all the time.
You saved me.
Pardon?
You saved me.
Well, I tried to.
You saved so many tulkus by saying that.
Yeah. Well, I see how you are raised.
Yeah.
And I see how people treat you. I was always had the privilege of always being in tulku company all the time. I was in India.
Yeah, that's why I always tell people, my friends who call themselves my students, I say the first relation with your teacher should be seeing the teacher as a human being and to connect him as a human to human. So it's very important to build the connection with your teacher as a human to human. And then after that, you wanted to see beyond the human. Then you wanted to see some great qualities. Then you have to buy this guru thing. Otherwise, most people do like, I want to see guru. First you made him and then you felt like, there are few cases like that for sure, that. But it doesn't work for everybody. So it is a very safety approach. So to see a human being in a guru and then take it to the next step. So like you are doing with me. So that's great.
And also, even when there's a big age difference, there's quite an age difference between us now, but I'm talking about when they're very young students and a very old teacher, to realize that the old teacher gets tired, to realize that the old teacher needs, maybe help in getting up or, not to make outrageous demands on the person. You can't be buddy, as if you're equal when you're 20 years old and the teacher is 60. But treat them as a human being in terms of what's appropriate to the age.
Well, I think that's probably what we have time for today.
Okay.
So, Serkong Rinpoche, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
For your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. That's it. So that was the first.
Now you have to plug Study Buddhism.
That's what I'm about to do.
Yes.
You think I don't know? What's the name of the website again that we... how many languages?
www.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, there's some kind of website. No. So thank you so much. That was our first in hopefully many Study Buddhism chats. If you want to learn more about Buddhism, just go to www.studybuddhism.com. And if you viewers like what you've seen today, please please subscribe, please share. And if there are...
On our social media, obviously, not on the website.
People know what they're doing.
What they're doing, I don't know.
Alex,
young people with social media, it's really...
Of course, they're not going to share on our website. They can't go into the CMS, can they?
No, I guess not.
I hope not.
I guess
not.
I'm a dinosaur.
We've been hacked.
I'm a dinosaur.
Okay. So, if you liked what you saw today, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share. And if there are any topics that you would like us to cover in the future, comment below. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.